All right, welcome back, everybody. It looks like you guys sent in a ton of crypto news this week. Wow, things are definitely heating up in the crypto world.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got everything from like Bitcoin holding strong, Ethereum getting ready for a big upgrade. Even meme coins are back in the headlines.
Yeah,
You ready to dive into all this?
let's do it.
Awesome. Well, I think a good place to start is with Bitcoin. You've been watching it closely,
Hmm.
and it's interesting because even with all the market volatility, Bitcoin's, kind of stubbornly staying above that $42,000 mark.
Hmm.
What do you think's going on there?
I think it's a really positive sign. One of the things to think about is that this isn't just about day traders anymore. We're seeing more and more institutional investors, like big financial firms, actually putting their money into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that kind of long-term confidence from those big players can
Yeah.
really help to stabilize the market.
It's interesting because for a while it felt like a lot of people were, kind of writing Bitcoin off. But now it's attracting some serious players,
Mm.
which is really interesting. But let's move on to Ethereum.
Mm.
There's a lot of buzz about this Shanghai upgrade. Can you explain what that actually means, especially for those of us who, aren't super techie?
Sure. So in the simplest terms, just imagine Ethereum is like a highway, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
sometimes, it can get really congested, which makes transactions slow and can make them really expensive. So the Shanghai upgrade is like, imagine like adding more lanes to the highway
okay. I like that analogy. Yeah.
and improving the traffic flow. So what that means is, faster transactions, lower fees, which is a big deal for anyone who's actually using Ethereum, especially if you're into things like decentralized finance or DeFi or NFTs.
So it's like Ethereum is getting like a much needed efficiency boost. And speaking of navigating some tricky terrain, Binance, which is the world's largest crypto exchange, is facing some regulatory hurdles. What's the latest there?
Yeah, I mean, regulation is definitely a really hot topic in the entire crypto world right now. I think governments around the world are, still trying to figure out the best way to approach this new technology. And, Binance is feeling the pressure from that.
Yeah.
They've had to ramp up their compliance efforts, especially when it comes to KYC, which is know your customer.
Oh, right.
And it's basically a way of verifying the identity of their users,
Mm.
which is becoming, standard practice in a lot of countries to try to prevent things like money laundering.
So increased scrutiny for Binance. But on the flip side, we have Ripple making headlines with the legal win against the SEC. What happened there, and why is everyone so interested in this case?
Right. So Ripple has been in this like battle with the SEC for a while now over whether their cryptocurrency XRP should be classified as a security.
Yeah.
And there have been some new documents that have been released recently that have kind of thrown a wrench in the SEC's argument.
Yeah.
Because they suggest that even, within the SEC, there was a lot of confusion about how to classify XRP.
Right.
And this is a big deal because it could have massive consequences for Ripple. And a lot of people are watching it very closely because it could set a precedent for how other cryptocurrencies are regulated down the line.
It sounds like a real legal thriller unfolding.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Solana now. For a while there, it was facing some challenges, but it seems like it's making a big comeback, especially in the DeFi space. What do you think's driving this resurgence?
Yeah, well, Solana's DeFi ecosystem has really been kind of exploding.
Yeah.
And one of the key metrics that we look at in the DeFi space is called total value locked, or TVL. And it basically represents the total amount of assets that are locked up in DeFi protocols on a particular blockchain.
Right.
And, Solana actually recently crossed that $1 billion mark for TVL.
Wow.
Which is a really, really strong indicator that there's, growing confidence, there's a lot of activity, there are a lot of new projects that are being launched, partnerships are forming, and so it's definitely a space to watch.
So $1 billion locked in. That's a lot of people putting their faith in Solana. And while we're on the topic of mainstream adoption, even Telegram, the messaging app, is taking a leap into the crypto world.
Yeah.
They've launched this new wallet that's based on their TON blockchain.
Yeah.
What's the significance of that?
Well, the thing about Telegram is they have a massive user base. hundreds of millions of people around the world use Telegram.
Yeah.
And, by adding, integrating a crypto wallet directly into their platform, they're basically opening the door for a ton of new users. People who might have never even thought about using crypto before.
Right.
So I think it's just a really great example of how mainstream platforms are really starting to embrace crypto. And that's making it more and more accessible to everyday people.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point.
Yep.
And speaking of mainstream, we have PayPal getting in on the action too. They're now offering on-chain stablecoin payments using their own PYUSD stablecoin.
Yeah.
So what does that actually mean for someone who's, maybe just starting to explore crypto?
Right. So essentially what PayPal is doing is they're making it possible for people to, send and receive stablecoins directly on the blockchain, through their platform.
Okay.
And stablecoins are designed to be pegged to, a stable asset like the US dollar, for example.
Yeah.
So they're not as volatile as some of those other, cryptocurrencies that people might have heard about.
Yeah.
And I think this move could make it easier for people to start using crypto for those everyday kinds of transactions, kind of like using a digital version of cash.
Right. So PayPal's kind of bridging the gap between traditional finance and the world of crypto, which is really interesting. But on the regulatory front, it seems like the U.S. is finally trying to get a handle on things. There's this new bipartisan bill focused on stablecoins and DeFi. What's the scoop on that?
Yeah, so this bill is getting a lot of attention because it's trying to create a clearer, regulatory framework for stablecoins and DeFi here in the U.S. And if it actually passes, it could have a huge impact on how those parts of the crypto industry operate. It could potentially attract more of those institutional investors that we were talking about earlier, encourage more innovation, but also address some of those concerns about consumer protection and market stability.
Yeah, so a lot of potential implications there. Now, I remember when everyone was saying, NFTs were dead.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like maybe they're making a little bit of a comeback.
Yeah, I think so.
What's going on in the NFT space these days?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a resurgence of interest in NFTs recently. You might have seen the headlines about that Sotheby's auction, for example. There was a collection of digital art that sold for $20 million.
Wow.
So that definitely caught people's attention. And, now with Telegram integrating NFTs into their platform, it seems like they're not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah. It seems like there's always a new twist in the crypto world. And before we wrap up this whirlwind tour of, crypto news, we have to talk about meme coins. Dogecoin and Shiba Inu are back in the headlines, thanks in part to, Elon Musk and his pronouncements on X, formerly Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on this resurgence?
I think, meme coins have always kind of had this unique appeal, especially to retail investors. They're often driven by social media hype and speculation. And, Elon Musk's tweets definitely have a way of amplifying that.
Oh, yeah.
But, while they can be a lot of fun and, exciting to watch, it is important to remember that they are inherently pretty risky investments.
Yeah, a little bit of caution is needed when venturing into the land of meme coins. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Bitcoin, Ethereum, regulation, NFTs, meme coins. It's a lot to digest.
Definitely.
But before we move on to some of the other really exciting trends that you've sent us, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What stood out to you the most in all this crypto news and why?
Well, I think what's really fascinating to me is how all these different trends, they all seem so different, but they're actually all interconnected.
Yeah.
You have this tension between, innovation and regulation, between, mainstream adoption, but also, the decentralized kind of ethos of crypto.
Right.
And then you have the emergence of all these new technologies, like, we were talking about tokenization, artificial intelligence. All of those have the potential to completely reshape the landscape of crypto. So it's just this really dynamic and complex ecosystem. And honestly, I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not just about the individual headlines, but about understanding how all of these different pieces fit together. And for you listening, what's caught your attention? What trend has you kind of leaning in, wanting to know more? Keep that question in mind as we continue our deep dive.
As we're going through all of these articles you sent, one thing that's really caught my eye is this trend of real-world asset tokenization.
Yeah.
It seems like it could be a game changer. I mean, even beyond crypto.
Okay, tokenization, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for us? What does that even mean? And then maybe give some examples of how it could actually impact everyday people?
Sure. So imagine like you own a piece of real estate,
Okay.
like a house or even like a share of an apartment building.
Right.
With tokenization, you could basically create like a digital representation of that ownership on a blockchain. So it's kind of like turning a physical asset into a digital asset.
Okay. So it's like you're taking something from the real world and like creating a digital twin of it on the blockchain.
Mhm.
But what's the point of doing that? Like, what are the advantages?
Well, I think for one thing, it could make investing way more accessible.
Okay.
Let's say you wanted to like invest in a piece of prime real estate,
Right.
but you don't have millions of dollars to buy a whole building, right? With tokenization, you could actually buy like a fraction of that building,
Oh, interesting.
represented by a token. It's kind of like buying a share of a company, but for like a
Yeah.
physical asset.
So instead of needing like millions of dollars to invest in a skyscraper, you could buy like a tiny little piece of it
Exactly.
for a much lower price. That's really cool. But what about like the practical side of things? How would buying and selling these tokenized assets actually work?
Well, that's where, blockchain technology really comes in. Because, everything is recorded on the blockchain. It's very transparent. It's secure. You can track ownership. You can see the history of the asset. And it makes the buying and selling process so much more streamlined.
So it's like cutting out all that red tape
Exactly.
and making investing more like democratic in a way.
Hmm.
But I mean, like with anything new, I'm sure there are probably some downsides or risks involved.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the biggest ones is probably regulation. Governments are still trying to figure out like how to classify and regulate these tokenized assets.
Right.
And that kind of uncertainty can make investors a little hesitant, understandably. And then, of course, there's always the issue of security.
Right.
While, blockchain technology in general is known for being very secure, we've seen that even the most secure systems can still be vulnerable to hacks or exploits. So it's really important to make sure there are like really strong security measures in place.
Yeah, totally. So tokenization is definitely a trend to watch with the potential to change how we invest and how we interact with assets in the real world, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears a little bit and talk about another buzzword that's been, making the rounds, the metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is the metaverse and why should we even care?
Well, the metaverse is essentially, it's kind of like a collection of these interconnected virtual worlds where people can interact with each other, participate in experiences, even own digital assets. It's kind of like, if you think about stepping into like a video game,
Oh, okay.
but it has much broader implications than just gaming.
So it's not just about gaming.
No, not at all. Think about things like, virtual conferences
Okay.
where you can attend from anywhere in the world, or like virtual offices where you can collaborate with colleagues in a way that feels much more immersive, right? You could have, virtual fashion shows, concerts, art galleries. I mean, the possibilities really are limitless.
And how does crypto play a role in all of this?
Well, you can think of it as cryptocurrencies could be used for like transactions within the metaverse. NFTs could be used to represent ownership of virtual items, and blockchain technology itself could be used to underpin that whole infrastructure, making sure that things are, secure and transparent.
So the metaverse could like change how we work, how we socialize, even how we express ourselves creatively.
Exactly.
But I mean, it also sounds pretty futuristic. Is this something that we should expect to see anytime soon? Or is it more of a long-term vision?
I mean, it's definitely still early days.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of technical challenges that still need to be worked out. But you can see the momentum is building. A lot of major companies are investing very heavily in this space. So I definitely think it's a trend worth paying attention to because it really does have the potential to like reshape our digital lives.
All right. From the metaverse, let's bring it back down to earth for a second and talk about central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs.
Yeah.
What are they and why are so many countries exploring this idea?
So CBDCs are essentially, they're like digital versions of a country's fiat currency issued and controlled by the central bank. So think of it like, digital cash.
Okay.
But it's backed by the government. And, a lot of countries are really interested in them because they could offer a lot of potential advantages over both physical cash and our existing digital payment systems.
So how are they different from the cryptocurrencies that we've been talking about, like Bitcoin, for example?
Well, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, they're decentralized.
Right.
Which means they're not controlled by any single entity, right?
Right.
But CBDCs, on the other hand, they're centralized and they're controlled by that central bank.
So it's like having like a digital dollar
Exactly.
in my digital wallet.
Yeah.
But instead of it being issued by, like, a bank, it's issued by the Federal Reserve.
Exactly. And the people who are really big proponents of CBDCs argue that they could help promote financial inclusion. By giving more people access to digital financial services, they could make payments more efficient, reduce those transaction costs, and even like help combat some illicit activities, like money laundering and things like that.
I mean, those sound like some pretty compelling benefits.
Yeah.
But I imagine there were probably also some concerns around CBDCs as well, right?
Oh, for sure. I think one of the biggest concerns is privacy.
Okay.
If every single transaction you make is being recorded on a central bank's ledger, that raises a lot of questions about, surveillance and control. And there are also concerns about, the potential impact that it could have on commercial banks, the overall stability of the financial system. So it's a complex issue with a lot of different things to consider.
So it's definitely something to keep an eye on as more countries, move towards potentially implementing them. Now let's move on to something a little bit more, shall we say, experimental. Decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs.
Mm-hmm.
What in the world are DAOs, and why are people so excited about them?
So DAOs are really fascinating. I mean, they basically represent like a completely new way of organizing and governing ourselves.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a group of people coming together online.
Okay.
They have a shared goal. It could be anything. It could be, investing in a new project or, supporting a social cause.
Right.
And they create this DAO, which is basically like a set of rules that are encoded on a blockchain.
So it's like a company or an organization, but instead of having a CEO or a board of directors, it's run by code on the blockchain.
Exactly. And, everyone who holds tokens in that DAO actually has a say in how it's run. They can vote on proposals, make decisions collectively, and, that whole process is totally transparent and it's auditable on the blockchain.
That sounds incredibly, democratic and efficient.
Yeah.
But, I mean, are there any, challenges in managing an organization entirely through code?
Well, yeah. I mean, one challenge is, making sure that there's, effective decision-making happening in this decentralized environment. How do you get everyone to agree? How do you prevent, bad actors from kind of hijacking the process? And then there are, a lot of legal questions around how DAOs are recognized, how they're regulated. So those are definitely things that, people are working through.
So it sounds like DAOs are still kind of in their early stages, but they have the potential to really disrupt these traditional models of governance and how organizations are actually run.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, let's talk about another disruptive force, artificial intelligence, or AI. How is AI being used in the crypto world, and what are the potential implications?
Well, AI is already making a big impact in crypto. We're seeing AI-powered trading bots that can, analyze market data and execute trades way faster than any human could. And we're also seeing AI-driven security solutions to help detect and prevent fraud. And then there are even some developers who are exploring how AI could be used to create more sophisticated, more intelligent smart contracts. So it's, a really wide range of applications.
So AI could make crypto trading more efficient, more secure, and even more intelligent.
Potentially.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, are there any risks in giving AI so much power in the financial world?
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern. I mean, we need to be really mindful of things like, the potential for bias in AI algorithms, the possibility of, AI being used for malicious purposes.
Right.
So I think it's important to have those ethical guidelines in place, those safeguards, as we integrate AI more and more into this ecosystem.
All right. We've covered so much: tokenization, the metaverse, CBDCs, DAOs, now AI. It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more topic you sent us: the environmental impact of crypto. This has been a point of contention for a while now. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's true that, crypto has gotten a lot of criticism over the years for its energy consumption,
Yeah.
especially Bitcoin with, that proof of work mining system.
Right.
But I think there's definitely a growing movement towards more sustainable practices in the industry. You're seeing more crypto projects adopting proof-of-stake consensus mechanisms, which are much more energy efficient. And there's a lot of innovation happening around, using renewable energy sources for to power those crypto mining operations.
So it sounds like the industry is taking steps to address its impact, which is good. I know for me, personally, that's something I think about, when I'm deciding which projects to support.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about finding that balance between this technological innovation, but also environmental responsibility.
Absolutely. And I think, it's not just about individual projects making these changes, but there's also this growing awareness of the importance of sustainability at like an industry level.
Yeah.
So there are organizations and initiatives specifically dedicated to, promoting sustainable practices, finding ways to reduce the carbon footprint of that whole crypto ecosystem.
Well, it's been quite a journey exploring all these different sides of the crypto world.
Yeah.
I mean, we've covered so much ground, everything from market trends to like the potential impact of these new technologies, the whole regulatory landscape, even like the ethical considerations around things like AI and sustainability.
I think it just goes to show how dynamic and how multifaceted this space really is. It's constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And it challenges us to really rethink how we think about finance, technology, even how we organize ourselves.
Yeah. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to get back to that question we asked earlier. With so much happening in crypto, what trend has you most curious? Like what's really sparked your interest? Maybe made you want to learn more, maybe even explore getting involved yourself.
I think that's the beauty of the crypto world. There really is something for everyone,
Yeah.
whether you're fascinated by, decentralized finance or the creative possibilities of like the metaverse or even, the societal implications of this technology. There really is a path for you to explore.
So keep that curiosity alive. Stay informed. And don't be afraid to dive a little deeper into the things that resonate with you. Who knows? You might just discover your next passion, or you might even find yourself shaping the future of this whole space. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and be sure to stay tuned for more.